began to take over the world in the 15th and the 16th century. And what Rogers has done is gone back and taken a whole lot of the white away and showed you the original black faces of certain people in history. In this 2-volume work, World's Great Men of Color, Volume 1 is devoted to the Old World, and Volume 2 is devoted to the New World. The first thing he does is to put Egypt in proper context and to show Egypt and the great personalities of ancient Egypt as black people. And it might be startling, but he reveals that Cleopatra did not look like Elizabeth Taylor and wasn't a white woman at all. And I think his book starts in Egypt with the other great characters in Egypt, Imhotep, the real father of medicine, father of architecture, builder of the step pyramids, forerunner of astronomer, a man who was accepted as a god in Europe long before the birth of Christ. Imhotep lived about 5,000 years ago. And early Europe accepted quite a few Africans as deities. And Imhotep was one of them. And he opens the book actually with this great African who was the world's first multi-genius.
You said that Rogers put Egypt in its proper perspective. What did you mean by that?
I mean, if European historians acknowledge that ancient Egypt was a black nation, then they would have thrown all Western history out of kilter, because Western historiography is based on the mistaken concept that if Egypt wasn't European, it was at least Oriental. It was neither. Because Rogers traced, as many competent historians, black and white, have already done, the southern origins of Egypt, and that the people who would later be called Egyptians came from deep within Africa, maybe Ethiopia and Somaliland. And they kept good relationships, good and bad, like all families, with the people to the south all of this time. And the proof is positive. And do not think that Rogers is out on a black thing, or that most black historians are out on a solely black thing. Most of us got our most radical information from white writers that other white historians do not read, such as Gerald Massey and his 6-volume classic work called Egypt, Light of the World, which proved positively that ancient Egyptians were black. Count Vorez in his Ruins of Empires, Gustav Hearns in a 6-volume work, Researches in the Ancient History. The early work of the American Egyptologist Breasted, Sir Wallace Budge. And so we are going to radical historians, especially Massey and his Natural Genesis and the Book of the Beginning, establish behind them the black perspectives in history. And if white historians accept the black perspectives in history, they would have to admit that the white perspectives in history is wrong. And I'm afraid they're not quite equal to that right now.
Well, what is the, if there is a black perspective in history, there is a white perspective in history. Mm-hmm. And you're saying, I'm assuming, that history is being manipulated for an end.
In itself.
In itself.
History, the Europeans began to manipulate history when they rose and began to expand into the broader world in the 15th and the 16th century, because they had to justify the slave trade and they had to justify the colonial system that followed. And modern racism has its incubation in that period. You cannot enslave a man and say he's a human being, that he has humanity, he has and that he was one of the forerunners of the world's religion. You cannot enslave an African and say this about him, because if you say he's a human being, then you're saying he's an extension of you. Then you cannot sell an African Christianity and call him a heathen and acknowledge the African contribution toward the creation of Christianity. So it's a contradiction in acknowledging that the man created Christianity, then come back and say that you are selling him Christianity because he is a heathen. So the European had to literally strip history of the contributions of non-European people. To a certain extent, they did this in Asia. Now, what Rogers has done in these two books is to go back and set history in some kind of prospectus based on this information. And all of the information did not come from black historians. It came from the best records available from all of them.
Now, speaking of information, Rogers has alleged some very startling things, and we're using that word because I think in the context of having had only white history, anything black is startling, and so I'm saying it in a positive way. That some of his information has said that there were a number of American presidents who actually were black, that there were a number of prominent Americans that history has treated as whites, who by his criterion or criteria of who was black and white, according to society's definition, were black.
Oh, no, not according to Rogers' definition now. Understand, and this is the irony of it all, and this is the trap. Black people have never written any definitions of race, any definitions of what a people mean, has been. I mean, they have never said that these people with these kind of traits belong here, because modern racism had its development in the pseudo-scientific development of intellectual Europe after the 15th century, and they began to say that certain kind of people belong to certain kind of race, and they created the concept of race and racism itself. Now, according to the laws that's still on the statute book of the United States and some other parts of the world, one drop of us makes you a whole. Now, this ridiculous law and stipulation and measurement has given black people a lot of white people according to that law. Now, it has given us Beethoven, who was called a dark Moor. Now, he was probably one of the many olive-complected Europeans that you see in the millions throughout Europe. But in the States, in the United States, they say that if you have one drop of blood of a black person, you're a whole black person. Now, by this stupid law, we have a whole lot of white people. There's a whole lot of people that think they're white that belong to us. We might claim all of South America because the Spaniards were mulattoes when they got there, having been mixed with the Moors for nearly 800 years, and they were even before the Moorish conquest. Mediterranean Europe was highly mixed with Africa. Because nobody thought anything of it because they were a mixture of power and influence and trade, and they got along fairly well together for hundreds of years before they turned on each other. And I don't say it did the Europeans any harm, because the handsomest people in Europe are the olive-complected people who mix with the Africans.
You're saying, in essence, that there's no such thing as a race.
Oh, I maintain that race is the phoniest issue ever invented by the mind of man. The European invented and developed the concept of race. There's really no such thing as a race, because nature created no races. The whole race is a man-made thing, you know.
Well, how did people get to be French and English?
Well, different climatic conditions and migrations and amalgams of different people, and migrations of people into your country, migrations of people out. All right. Now, this is an ethnic grouping as against what we call race. If you go back and you look at an old dictionary, you won't even find a definition for a race. Race grew out of the pseudo-scientific development of Europe, and this is what Rogers was addressing himself to, and saying that according to your rule, which is ridiculous, a lot of you belong to us.
Well, in another context, if race is arbitrary, then could we say that being called black was a political term?
It's a political term, and a term which indicates our self-awareness at this juncture in history, and I think we really need it. We need to really bathe in blackness for a while, but I wish we'd get the bath over with and go on to something a little more important, because black in itself is not an ethnic term. Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are. We are essentially an African people. Wherever we live on this earth, we're essentially an African people. And we relate to the millions of African people throughout the world, including the uncounted millions of Africans in Asia. The word Afro-American or African-American would probably be more appropriate and more honest and more in keeping with what we actually are, because all of us are not positively, physically, real jet black. And so the argument now sometimes is between the supernationalists and the mild nationalists and blacker than thou, when blackness is a state of mind, a state of attitude, a state of approach to things that can exist in almost any of us, including from the blonde black person to the jet black.
Okay. For the sake of our international audiences, I say good morning one more time.
back.
Attract the needed investment in the region and also boost the local economy through this reunion and collaboration. I will take this opportunity to entreat the organizers of this program to remain committed to the noble cause by highlighting the importance of this festival for economic development, as well as using the vehicle of art and culture to provide a forum to promote unity between Africans on the motherland and those in the diaspora. Let us also use this opportunity to strengthen the bonds of solidarity between us and our peering overseas in the Americas and all around the globe, and also have the opportunity to restate that the unity of all Black people is bound up with the destiny of Africa. Mr. Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would once again welcome you all to this colloquium and also the central region. It is my expectation that we will continue to rededicate ourselves to those sessions of unifying with our brothers and sisters, the diaspora, transform the Africa context. Thank you very much for this work. Very much for I thought that I was going to comment. We need to allow people to found the destiny of Africa. That's the thing that we share. Very much about that. So now we are going to get closer to the keynote address, and I would love to invite the president of the African Heritage Institute, Ife Williams, to address.
Good morning. I would like to welcome and thank you for that message. Our speaker of the day, Nana Kobina Nketsia, our executive secretary of Panafest, the faculty of UCC, students, and our brothers and sisters who join us virtually throughout Africa and the African diaspora. This is on African Heritage Studies Association to be a part of this collaboration with UCC and Panafest for this occasion. I know Dr. Jonathan Clarke is with us in spirit and giving us his time and blessings. I would like to now introduce our moderator who's going to introduce our speaker, Dr. Linda Eaton. She's an associate professor at the Department of African and African American Studies at the University of Oklahoma. She's a scholar of Black literary and cultural studies. She specializes in Black women's lives and historical narratives. She is also an affiliate member of the Department of English, African Studies Institute, and Department of Women's Studies. Very interesting in studying the Black migration into the western part of the United States. So we focus on the northeastern part of the South. Very special. But most of all, she is a board member of African Heritage Studies Association. We're very hard to get us all here today. So with that, I would like to bring up my friend, my sister, Dr. Van Vicky.
Mine is also off. Now it happens.
Good morning. Good morning. Pleasure to be with you this morning. Nice man. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. Nice. Hello? Is that better? Okay. Is that better? Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Williams, for that. Thank you very much, Dr. Williams, for that lovely introduction. My task is to introduce our keynote speaker, and then followed by our keynote speaker will be then a roundtable with members of the community on the legacy of Dr. John Henrik Clarke. Dr. Nana Nketsia V. Born in Sekondi in the western region of Ghana, he was educated at the University of Ghana and the University of Calabar in Nigeria, where he obtained his doctorate degree in African history for his work on the Oron in Nigeria. His areas of special interest are Africanism, African culture and religion, and governance, law, and philosophy. Patron of the Yesartico Genius Award, also lectures at the University of Cape Coast in history, the Institute of Development Studies, and other departments. Nana's writings focus on culture and African thought. His most recent publication on African culture and governance and development is titled The Ghana Paradigm, was launched by the Vice President of Ghana on November 25th, 2013. The book presents a compelling argument for the need of a cultural approach to development and political thinking that pushes boundaries on what Ghana must do to become truly democratic, decolonized, and sovereign. Nana is currently the chair of the advisory committee of CARE International, the chair of Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum, the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum Governing Board, the chair of WaterAid, of the WaterAid Strategic Advisory Committee, member of the Western Region House of Chiefs, member of the National House of Chiefs, the national patron of Haiti Record Festival, and director of the Panafest Foundation. Please join me in giving a round of applause for Dr. Nketsia. I will introduce Leonard Jeffries, who will be giving the remarks. So we can move through quickly through the program. I will do the introduction now. Dr. Leonard Jeffries, also known as Nana Kwadwo-Agyemang II, is a political scientist, historian, educator, master teacher, and Pan-Africanist. He was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, where as a young man, he first developed his leadership skills and Pan-African consciousness. After receiving an excellent formal and informal education at outstanding universities in America and Europe, he has become a leading voice in the African-centered education movement. He is regarded as a foremost authority on Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. He speaks French and takes courses in Portuguese and Russian. He is the International Executive Director of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which was founded in 1964 by Malcolm X. He is also currently the International President of the World African Diaspora Union and founding director and former Vice President and President of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. Dr. Jeffries assisted Dr. John Henrik Clarke in establishing the African-centered organization, the African Heritage Studies Association, and later became its vice president. Currently, he and his wife, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, also lead the Elders Council of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization.
1772, he was recruited by the City College of New York to organize their Black Studies Department, and he later became chair and a tenured professor. So we will hear from Leonard Jeffries after we hear from the esteemed Anana Nketsia V. Thank you.
The Honorable Regional Minister, the speech we discuss. If we have African politicians like you, when you made the statement, I looked at Rabbi Kavin and asked, if we can make that kind of statement, then why are we where we are? So let's hope that you live by the word. You live by the word. The president of CASA, my very special friend, my brother, Rabbi Opoku-Agyemang of the Panafest Foundation. I'm not very good at protocols, so please, after stating these three, I'm standing on the kind of protocols the regional minister beautifully provided. Well, when this whole colloquium then started, it was really wonderful to see Professor, the very charismatic and great African friend, Professor Beina Bello, being the first to impart some of her wisdom to open the colloquium session. It was simply wonderful. Most of us are not aware of the strong connection that Haiti has with this African space labeled Ghana during the effort to free the space from overt, and I deliberately use the word overt, colonialism. In the 1950 manifesto, coming from a CPP, for example, it resonated with slogans such as, "In our own God-given land, give us liberty or give us death." The day I read that, I could see the power of the fusion of thoughts across the Atlantic. It's as if the ancestors who had fought against the French in Haiti had returned home to this African space to urge the people with freedom or death. Of course, this will be better appreciation through understanding our belief in our return to the ancestral belief of origin upon death. Liberty or death still reverberates in authentic African gatherings such as this. Jean-Jacques Dessalines' statement, "We have dared to be free. Let us dare to be so by ourselves and for ourselves," courses through our veins. If not, you wouldn't be here. And when we sit in such a forum, we are spurred on by the issues raised by Dessalines in that, what are the people who have fought, for us? What people would reap the fruits of our labors? And what a dishonorable absurdity to conquer to be slaves. Haiti, 1800. Africa, 2021. Professor Bello brought all this out in a royal speech. And let me tell you, authentic royalty does not lie in an assumed position. A pig assuming the office of a king or queen is still a pig. No amount of adornments and makeup will make it less a pig. Authentic royalty is conferred by God in our ancestors. It manifests itself through thought and character. Professor Bello, thank you for your inspiration. Undeniably, the enemies of Africa thrive on our divisions. Anyone who does not like Africa fights covertly or overtly against any form of our unity. Pan-Africanism, for example, is a threat to Africans who think they benefit from the weakness of Africa. Understandably, even studies in educational institutions, such as this, tend to be unconsciously limited to the Berlin-generated space. Survey the continent and ask yourselves which forms of leadership are working assiduously toward collapsing the imaginary Berlin architecture. Think about it. Which leaders come up and say, let's collapse our borders and fight and work towards collapsing our borders? But we want a new architecture for Africa. Generally, the lip services and activities of the sociopolitical leadership make the idea of African unity a farce.
Hello.
The leadership also thrives on African division in very limited, myopic, and selfish thinking.
Yes.
Such leaders also referred to as the misleaders and not appreciate what we, including them, will all gain in a suddenly united Africa. They don't understand. It's beyond their understanding. Putting my thoughts together, it occurred to me how unique and auspicious this colloquium is. Most especially for my very humble self. First, it is part of the Pan-African Festival, with Rabbi as his executive secretary. This is a very important time of the African calendar, which some of us pray will grow from strength to strength and generate a powerful African consciousness, whose fruition will be a vital foundation for the regeneration of this continent. The time of regeneration is near, and it cannot be stopped. The humble and unpretentious African queen, Ife Sutherland, or some of us affectionately call her Nketsia V, who visited Canada, was interestingly very closely connected to my late uncle. I remember when we were bringing my uncle from Accra. We were leaving Accra, getting to Medina. Suddenly, Nketsia came to the house and said, please, I wasn't another. He said, but and I have looked at his face before you take him away. I'm not too strong to come for the rights of going to the court. There was resistance because most of the people standing there did not even know who she is. I said, this is a special process. She went with a promise that she's going to hear somebody else. We're going to organize final rights when the time comes. Help organize the final rights. Unfortunately, it was within that year, or a year after that, she too. So they had a good thing to further, this university, which I'm proud to have said, is also indelibly associated in its seminar stage with my silent but ubiquitous predecessor. So we have two things, Panafest and Nketsia V, my predecessor. This university, the details are not necessary here. However, this university is located in a space known for being the outlet of the most ghastly things that have happened to the African over time. You have the Elmina Castle, or the Elmina, it's not better, the two monsters, the Elmina and Kwadwo Castles. Last but not least, is also the fact that the African Heritage Studies Association is making its first formal appearance on the mother continent. Please clap for them. Some of us are very much aware that for over 50 years, ASA has been engaged in intellectual work to ensure the resurgence of the African on the globe. And the list of its distinguished presidents, such as James Turner, Donald Waters, Leonard Jeffries, Kwadwo Opoku-Agyemang, Leslie Alexander, Shelby Louise, Lisa Aubrey, this is terrible. Yeah, gracious. Revealed an association committed to the revitalization of Africa and Africans everywhere. Now, to be committed to Africa is to be a warrior for truth. So short and simple. And the truth of the African personality. When I attended last 2 years' conference, I had the personal fortune of our assistant, Lady Shelby Louise, by holding in hand to the African American Museum in DC. It was such an honor. And I do thank my ancestors for that opportunity. She's the kind of woman that you need to touch her, but we don't understand. Means something. The other, an ethnic group in West Africa, referred to the European as Ayeko. I've talked to several others. I'm not fluent in that language, but I like the word Ayeko. It simply means the cunning dog. European is the cunning dog. These scheming dogs have been waging a ruthless and unrelenting psychological war on Africa's humanity. The worst form of war is the war on the mind. Look at Africa. Everywhere is what? Europe. Everywhere. The continent reminds us of the Zale's observation with regard to 1800 Haiti. All is there to remind us of the atrocity of this barbarian people. Our laws, our customs, our cities, all bear the European imprint. What do I say? They are French, English, I'm adding the French, English, he said the French. They are French, English, and Portuguese in our continent. And you believe yourself to be independent or to be independent of that Europe. Now the Chinese are coming. And they are coming. In fact, what I should say is that they are here. And they are coming for their share, or they are here for their share of the continent. They were nice. They announced their presence in a positive way by constructing the African Union Center in Addis Ababa. When the symbol of your supposed union is a gift by a foreign power which wants to exploit you, its translation is beyond this paper. But definitely, Africans are ensnared by the foreign mindset. The mindset that produced the barbarity of enslavement and colonialism, along with their accompanying unbridled inhumanity, as well as the philosophers who contributed to the degrading Negro construct. The Saline statement is a better reminder to Africans that our laws, our customs, etc. And of course, there are Negroes in charge of Africa. Not very recently, there was, I think it was a joke. There was something going on WhatsApp that an African leader that I thought was going to speak, I heard him speak, I listened to him speak at the founder's funeral. And what did he do? He said he's going for a virtual conference, and Malawi doesn't have good connectivity. He was flying to England. Again, I mean, I don't want to believe it, but it's too stupid to be true. I'm sure somebody was just making a joke with WhatsApp. Let's take it back. But I dare say to you that even the God that Africans talk about today has been translated into an European one. Clarke taught, anytime you turn on your own concept of God, you are no longer a free man. No one needs to put chains on your body because the chains are already on your mind. Why don't you teach this guy here? Why don't you teach him in all the educational institutions in Africa? Why don't we interrogate these kind of things? Hence, the warrior God Henrik Clarke, blessed be his name, must be remembered not only for founding us, but also as serving us as president. Some of us merely talk, and I'm good at that, and take no action. Anytime I mention Clarke's name, in your head, say, blessed be his name. Clarke spoke and took action. He organized. I had the privilege of touring Clarke's house in Paris, in the exchange company of Dr. Leonard Jeffries. He was humble. I mentioned Clarke's name to a distinguished African philosopher from Cape Coast, William Abraham, and he said, not me, and Nketsia V had that name on his lips constantly. Clarke worked as a guinea press here in Ghana for a while. And this is the attachment that we should hold. I don't hear of him anywhere else in Africa besides Egypt and Ghana. He and my predecessor organized the second conference of Africans in the early 70s at Addis Ababa. In fact, my predecessor had been the secretary to the first conference in 1963. It was attended by another warrior, Sheikh Nketsia. Dr. Jeffries and Professor James Small told me that Clarke brought them on a special mission to my predecessor at his time. Thus, for me, the convergence of these three strands at this moment, University of Cape Coast, ASA, and Panafest, signals the idea that we are entering. We've really entered another phase of our struggle. The most important phase, emancipate the African mind from enslavement. When Sister Afia Zakia and Professor Opoku-Agyemang invited me to share a few thoughts today, my mind went to a title of an enthralling poem by Amiri Baraka. Afia had sent to me much earlier. Why is we America? No. Why is we Africans? Anybody can answer that? And that is the most important question that you need to ask yourself. Why is we Africans? The answer to that question is based on self-awareness. And with that, an acute awareness, the uniqueness of the African psyche, one's thoughts and existence will be shaped by others. So self-awareness of yourself as an African. If you don't know and understand yourself as an African, how can you free yourself and express the African personality to the world? You have no right to affirm an African identity without being African. A lot of people talk about being African. Meanwhile, they are not. They are everything else, but definitely not African. It is an understanding. It is in understanding the meaning of that identity that one can even glean the surface what it is Luna's courage, of it is Luna's courage when it's stated, dead or alive, free or in prison, it is not I myself who come. It is the African. It is our people for whom independence has been transformed into a cage. Reflect on any African country. The 3D, debt, dependency, and what? domination. Reflect on it for every African country. And ask yourself, how free are you? When you look at the constitutions, they were all bristled in Europe and brought to Africa. No African constitution is African. No institution in Africa is African. Examine them. Sometimes you have some heads of state who refer to themselves as excellency. I've been trying to understand that word excellency in an African language, and I still haven't found it. So if anybody knows it, please teach me. So you're giving somebody a red carpet treatment. Red among the Ewe, among the Asante, means danger. They're giving that person a dangerous treatment, and you see these red carpet being put down, and these people too with their shoes, from me. How? We can't go on like this. As Dr. Woodson said, once you control a man's mind, you do not have to worry about what? His actions. Of course, we say in Bantu people's expanded statement that the most potent weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressor. Who and what direction controls the African's mind? And what are the tools of control? The blessed teacher, Clarke, said, simply, powerful people cannot afford to educate the people they oppress. Simple, very simple. Because once you are truly educated, and the word truly is the operative word, you will not ask for power, you will take it. One of the most profound statements that is made. But of course, if you want to train people to ensure the privileges, the powers, the current crop of African leaders, that must be done in their life. Unless the leadership, just as this fine lady here, Rabbi Otunari, understands it the way she said it. But blessed be his name. And us have played a great role of making the blind to see. Through dismantling the myths, lies, and subterfuges used to keep the African in place. Without understanding the real causes and methods of oppression, you cannot have the power and ability to overcome it. Currently, the African mind is subdued. Sometimes I recall Osagyefo's eve of Ghana's independence oration, in which he stated, and this slide always causes me to laugh and cry and laugh. We are awake and we shall sleep no more. I agree, happy with him that we woke up and soon fell into a coma. The collective consciousness, awakened by the most important mass action towards Ghana's struggle for independence, was neutralized and liberated from independence in 1966. You know, you had the national liberators or whatever they were, NLC, who came to liberate us from independence and make sure that the mass consciousness, which was celebrated on January 8th in Ghana, we generated among the people that we must be free. Stop celebrating it. And that is for Ghana. Generally, the African mind is in a stupor. The current of misleaders, crop of misleaders, to say it that way. This university, in particular, which was instituted to carry the intellectual tradition, it was seen as radical at the time of John Mesa Saba, J.E. Kesle-Hepburn, and Governor Sedin to Africa, with the assistance of Panafest and ASA, should be at the forefront of waking up the African from his or her European inertia of France. 1913, I remember that Kesle-Hepburn was in second year and formed a society, an institute, and he called it the Gold Coast National Research Institute. They had an aim. The aim was very simple: to remove the white man's handball, and I'm quoting, to remove the white man's handball from the African's point of view. Very simple. At that time, go to the African university They are the missionaries of Europe, institutions of Europe, carrying on European activities and stamping, etching Europe on the mind of the young African. European doesn't like that. And so we'll end up doing what? Learning to hate ourselves. That is the path towards igniting an African relation, which has made this gathering towards the mission, towards the mission of ensuring the survival of it, made it a mission of ensuring the survival of African people and their culture. Therefore, all of us here in these three arms must be missionaries for Africanity. As intellectual missionaries or warriors, we must have a constant recollection of Clarke's words that every single thing that touches your life, religion, social, and political, must be an instrument of your liberation, or you may throw that to the ash can of history. Simple. I mean, that's fine. Sometimes I reflect on him and reflect on Malcolm X. It's a greater sharp intellect. Very logical. We don't want logic, we want beliefs. Whenever you say you believe, it means you are certain the fact that you don't know. So belief is based on the absence of knowledge. To pleasurize him, let me say this. Whoever or whatever is in control of this African hell of our lives is the devil. So the collective cultural mind of the African, which analyzes Africa's heritage, overlooks Africa's history and culture, and delves into the psychospiritual factors of Africa, must be awakened towards the Renaissance, which can only be done through sacrifice. Personally, my spiritual encounter with Clarke took place in 1995. Interestingly, that was the year, I think 2 or 3 months, my predecessor joined his ancestors, and Clarke also joined his ancestors, 1995. And I always remember it because of certain things. And I believe that, this one I say I believe, that when a student is ready, as they say, the teacher is. My encounter, I won't go into the detail, but on the surface, my encounter with Clarke was his notes for an African World Revolution. When I got a copy of his book that he had signed, I didn't even know what who poorly produced, etc. So I didn't bother about the situation. Now I wish I had. And I wish I had kept that book as sacred as some people keep the Quran and some to keep their Bible. Just as every good teacher does. The notes stimulated my consciousness. My eye was open. Soon, I became a disciple of this, devoured his lectures on YouTube, and felt that everyone who had sat at the feet of Clarke had sat at the feet of an African poet. His encyclopedic knowledge, and so pictures, I mean, they were showing something of it. And I was so happy after that. But if you have this, what am I even going to talk about? The blessed man. His encyclopedic knowledge of world history was incredible. But what was superior was in putting the African at the center of his world in his narration and analysis. Something that has not been done, or something that we were not doing. He changed my framework. He opened my eyes to see and understand how the European worldview had made me reject Africa and unwittingly become absorbed by Western ideas. The blessed man deconstructed European history and paradigm and provided a constructive and progressive approach to interpreting the reality of African peoples and peoples of African descent from an African world. It drew a sharp contrast between what I call the we-hood and the I-hood of Europe, which translates something to individuality, materialism, and control of the nation. In a way, it brought an understanding that, for instance, currently plaguing Africa, greed and materialism. But you see, in so doing, he also imbued me with the spirit of compassion. Because when I see the African misleaders misbehaving, which they should, because they've not been well brought up by the right education. And historically, so all this talk about corruption in Africa, in Kenya, in Ghana, Sierra Leone, South Africa, I get sympathy and I laugh. I feel sorry for them. But they don't know what they are doing. If only they knew, and if only they could be African, as Lumba said, they know that it is not they who matter, it is the people who matter. Don't blame them. In this hall that we are in, I remember I came here for a conference about how the ultra right, ultra left, I said that time, and I asked them, ultra left of what? And ultra right of what? And the center right? Go to your parliament, don't be talking about the left of center and the right of center. Is it left of center of my black school or right of center of my black school? But you hear this kind of talk, foolish talk among Africans, but you don't blame them. It's an exhibition of what? Miseducation. Go to the political science department, St. Mark's, Law, this, that. At the end of the day, what about Africa? Africa has no thoughts. That is the challenge the University of Naples has. Whose sociology are we teaching? Whose history? In what way am I related to the French Revolution, for example? That I should study the French Revolution. What do I pick out of it for Africa? So these are the challenges. For all of us, you know, all of our South Africa has gone very far. Please don't work with consciousness. But Ghana, which is the black star, it happens with the help of Hassan and with the help of Canada. It is our duty, God-given duty, for this space to pick up that mantle. We need to raise, you remember, just hear one African talk about economics, and you start talking about middle classes and other. Who are the middle classes in Africa? How did they become middle of the class? And whose class? You had an European feudal society. These people have lived in a vertical structure over time. Nobility, kingship, commoners, peasants, so they got to us slaves. That's their class system, which has changed. With other words, they're just deceiving those at the bottom. Then you go and pick such labels up and apply it to yourself. The African middle class. Where are they going from? See the problems we are having. And this is what Clarke would tell you in a very beautiful way, in a very calmer way. And also analyze it from a historical point of view, showing you what your heritage is. That is the blessed John Henrik Clarke, the founder. I think that, was it this week or last week in Ghana? They were having what? Alternative dispute resolution. When they told me, I just bowled over and laughed. You bring the white man's law here and call mine alternative dispute resolution. There's something wrong with your head. Something definitely wrong with your head. But we'll get it. You don't do it over there. It's a mental. So the question is, why is we Africans? Just keep asking yourself that. Why is we Africans? We can't be African without we. So why is we? In Latin America, the word is. Clarke's mission in his life's work lies in getting Africans real freedom. It builds on Sheikh Anta analysis that a historical fact is a cultural cement that unifies the disparate elements of the people to make young people at home. And the particular slant of the feeling of historical continuity lived by the totality of the collective. That has my deal. So happy that the university has been named. One day, Center of Learning will be named after. Whatever I think about Sheikh Anta Diop's investing, I remember that Ife Williams is pretty close. And I said, well, we have an African from this side of the world living very close to that university. I hope it's getting in the minds of our brothers and sisters. The year of return, as we've been talking about, is not return that it's a return that we need to consider. It's a return to what? It's a return to indigenous dependency. Indigenous dependency translates into independence. You can't be independent, you rely on foreign ideas. I remember the late Professor Nketsia V shared the same difference. He was talking to us. He says that, oh, when Ghana was going to the government independence operations and Parliament was about to be was going to be declared in Parliament. The Kumar calls them. He says, how can an African world, an African state, show its independence, and all that you're going to do is wear robes, carry the white man's maid, and then they're going wearing suits and so on. No, we must show we are Africans. It's a very, very interesting thing. They said they heard you brought drummers and so on, and dancers to be performed. You know, you come and drum and dance, everybody must wear something African, and so on and so on. So it needs creativity. You cannot create on your oppressor's oppression. You can only create on your own originality. What Clarke preached to us. So we should not continue aping the structures and theories, blah, 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 of the world that doesn't like it. That only has one thing, exploit Africa. In the 1950s, in the 60s, in both America and in Ghana, we saw the freedom consciousness movement. We saw the Black consciousness movement, and so on. In fact, American colleges, college campuses had some of my heroes, Kamituri, and so on and so forth. The Black Panthers in Nigeria at that time, the guy who has been buried down there was Rap Brown, H. Rap Brown, and so on and so forth. In Ghana, you had the Nkrumah, you had the Yereres, you know, and Azikiwe, even though he's appointed as later, and so on and so forth. These emerged. They were showing in Africa that has become more political astute and historically and culturally better informed. In that rebel, that was the first rebel. Also emerged the kind of African-centered public intellectualism. So you had the historians, the philosophers, and so on writing. And they spoke and captivated audience, various college campuses and African colleges. But part of the fact that it makes sense to deconstruct the parameter of European discipline, knowledge discipline, and then reconstruct or construct the African discipline, and hence the African studies. That then becomes a kind of, what should I say, a kind of tunnel that you have to walk through in order to see the light. We've been engaged all this time using the Platonic allegory. You need to come into the African light. You need to come into the sun. The sun doesn't belong to you, it belongs to us. We have the melanin. So, in that self-concept ourselves in Africa, and in African reality, in our own epistemology, recently, who speaks Fancy very well here? Agita. Recently, I went to a conference. Almost all of them speak Fancy. And I asked them, have you heard this thing? Now, everybody's jaw dropped. Before Odumakwa is a woman, not a man. Before our mother, Odumakwa, I know that he's shaking a lot of people because somebody has turned God into a he. So to conceive God as a she, they are surprised. Before the benefactor created this world, infinite intelligence was already seated in his chair, and that is Anansi. So that one is uncreated. This was told us by our ancestors. We passed it on from age to age, but now we've settled our minds on learning Locke, Rousseau, Aristotle, name them. Every quotation, Thomas Jefferson said, I said, you know who Jefferson is? And they are quoting about democracy. And that shows the hypocrisy of democracy in Africa. Because those who are talking about democracy do not know democracy. We have democracy. They didn't have it. But now they tell you that they have democracy. So go to Africa, go to Nigeria, they form tribal parties, and they call them left, right, center, this. I don't want to talk about that. Otherwise, somebody will come and speak. So it's a challenge for us. It's a challenge for us. So we need to have a system of thought and action that examines the processes that allow for the illumination and for the illumination and liberation of the African spirit. I could go on and on and on. Black would never die. In Ghana, they say the Cuba never die. For an African to be an authentic African, black would be perceived as a savior. Is we Africans? Think about it. Thank you.
And those who are ancestors who have gone before. One such warrior is joining us virtually, and that is Leonard Jeffries. I think we will hear from him now.
Hotep family. Hotep is a greeting you often hear us use. We borrowed that from the Nile Valley, meaning peace. But we have to go beyond peace we have to move that peace into serious struggle, and struggle for our whole African presence, the ancestral presence, the present structures that we have to put in place to sustain ourselves, and do it all for the future, for the generations yet to come. So before I say anything, I really want to congratulate our brother, Nana Nketsia, for his great work. To have him open up this day is very important. I haven't had any sleep, simply because I didn't want to fall into a deep sleep and not be there when he was making his enormous presentation. So we hope that this presentation can be given to him so it can be clarified, and it can be part of a publication that we need. He handles so much because he's such an unusual individual among us. He has the indigenous roots deep in the African soil, and you can feel that, and he exudes that. But he also is reaching out to other Africans on the continent and other Africans within the context of the world. And then he especially embraces us who have deep roots and trying to build these bridges of Africanness. And he can feel it, he can see it when he sees us doing activities. I remember once we had this Cape Coast visual night, and we had the candles walking through Cape Coast, getting ready for the going into the dungeons and the rest. And but before the groups moved through the town and they came with the candles, I was asked to make a presentation at the entrance of the Cape Coast so-called Castle Dungeon. And it was very meaningful for me. I've been doing this for so many years. To see it continued and followed as a practice, I made a very strong presentation. Many of these presentations, we don't even have a record of. And just like this presentation that he made has to be recorded, we have to expand it. He has to expand it. We have to document it. He touched on so many things, but you have to expect that from him, because when anybody can get his mind and heart together with so many problems that you have to face in a new nation, a relatively new nation such as Ghana and the rest of the African independent states, and you're trying to deal with the indigenous transformations in your continent and around your family and within your context of your culture. I was so glad when he was able to become a giant at Cape Coast, the university, because our hotel that we invested in Ghana, and it's only a few miles, it's in the neighborhood of the university. So to have Dr. Nana Nketsia involved with us and relate Cape Coast University to our hotel investment. And that hotel investment was not for making money, it was to link us up to what slavery has done to all of us. And so we were, Professor Small and others, we formed a group that had that commission from the ancestors to find these linkages and make them real and make them valuable. So he was so important to us in the context of the university. But then when he stepped into a deeper role, being a traditional leader in one of the potential growth areas of the nation of Ghana, Takoradi Segumbe area, where there's so much wealth and riches that has not been fully prepared for development, then he took on another role within the tradition in a very important developmental area. So this meant he needed as much internal strength and ancestral power and the aid of the current leadership and the admiration and support and the wisdom he could transfer to the youth. So this Nana Nketsia is such an important figure for the contemporary history, for the past, and for the future. So you can't honor him enough. You can't recognize how important he is. But let's hope that the ancestor and the creator has a longer role for him to play, because he is so essential to what we need in terms of the future leadership. Just his work alone, just to carry this particular volume that he produced, which deals with those three factors that you need in terms of development. If you're going to do anything real, you have to understand what I call my triangle of empowerment, and that using the triangle shape of the pyramid to let us interact with things. So you have this process in which economics is the first principle in the triangle of empowerment. And your economics is essential for life. Economics is your creative, productive potential. And everything in order to live has to be creative and productive. And your economics begets your politics. Politics is not something you just pull out of the air. It's needed in order to manage your economics. So the foundation of what we have to do has to be centered in an economic dimension and a political dimension. So we can't just say I'm a politician and I'm not really worried about economics. We have to have the interaction, interrelationship between economics and politics, your creative, productive capability, along with your management capability. But if your economics and your politics are really going to serve you, then you have to have that third dimension. That when I use the concept, you have to try to be professorial in these classrooms. So I have thesis, the beginning, begets an antithesis. So you have the law of opposites, thesis, antithesis. But in order for something to be, you have to have the law of opposites, but it solidifies itself with a synthesis. So we have to be synthesizers. All of this fantastic work that we're reaching for and producing and relating to has to be worked up into a power formula of taking ideas, evaluating them, making them work, creating other ideas, creating other systems. Systems is the key. We need not individual, we can't rest on individual activity or even limited group activity. We need a systems activity that links economics, the foundation, with politics, and it is culminated with culture. Culture is the key. You cannot throw away that which your ancestors left for you for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Those traditions that we don't quite appreciate or understand have great value and need to be understood. Why? Because we're in the midst of an important historical period. I look at the whole of history. Dr. Clarke and Dr. Ben and these others told us we have to look to the origin of humankind and the development of humanity, and over great periods of time. So Dr. Clarke always gave me an extra boost and a responsibility. And one of the key things he wanted me to do was to deal with the question of how do we look at Africa and link it to the flow of human history. Now, he's a historian, so he thinks in terms of hundreds of years, a 200-year period or a 500-year period, and he presents his analysis based upon that historical understanding. Being a political scientist of sorts, or an Africanist interested in the politics, I think in terms of 50-year turning points of history. So in that triangle of historical power that I use, you have a 50-year turning point of history that relates to the ancient times. So that's the 50-year turning point of history. I call it the Queen T era or Queen Ti. That's the great Queen Mother whose great husband, Amenhotep III, they produced the great, contributed to the great dynasty of the great building in the Nile. And her son was the Pharaoh Akhenaten, who had this strong belief in a new spiritual level, etc. And then his wife that she helped arrange the marriage was Nefertiti. And then out of that family comes King Tut. So the Queen T era quickly and seriously establishes that the Africans had a formula that went for thousands of years. And that 50-year turning point of history, for me, is an exemplar of the various other dynasties. So you're talking about thousands of years of the highest development coming out of the Nile Valley around Black people, no matter what shade or color they were African peoples. And so that 50-year turning point of history helped to put us on the world stage in a big way. But then many, many years later, that's BC, AD, you have the European emerging on the world stage. And we need to study the European and how he has done what he has done with his institutions, organizations, values, beliefs, and his presence. And so Christopher Columbus is another 50-year turning point of history, the age of so-called discovery, the age of the institutionalization of full-blown global enslavement. And so you have the contrast between the era of Queen T and her great husband and the new consciousness that they left as a model. And then you have this European predator model, Christopher Columbus coming out of the icebox of Europe, as I would like to say, and Dr. Clarke, we're talking about the Northern Cradle, that they would be coming out of the Northern Cradle with this value system of greed and domination, et cetera, and the predator culture. And certainly Christopher Columbus, 1,000 years or so after the Nile Valley greatness, Christopher Columbus brings in this indigenous destruction of indigenous peoples, genocide, and other important things. And so that allows us to deal with the European on the world stage. And then, so the period that we're in, the period that we're in is the modern era. The 50-year turning point of history is our era. 1945 to 1995 is a 50-year turning point of history of African peoples. And that's when the great work that Dr. Nana Nketsia is doing and Dr. John Henrik Clarke and a host of people had done. And so we are now flipping this destructive process that the global community has been involved in. And we are now into the period of what we call the African Renaissance. And the symbol of that Renaissance we have here. My wife and I and others had a chance to, we got 350 people from the US and the Caribbean go to Senegal for the dedication of this particular monument, the African Renaissance Monument. And it's one of the greatest monuments that I can imagine, because it's not a war memorial. It's not a, yes, it is the rise of a people, the rise of the African family, and the Black man is rising, holding his child, and that child is pointing to the future. And then there is the mother, and the Black man is leaning on that rock, that female principle. And so the beauty of this, it's larger than the Statue of Liberty, it's larger than Jesus the Redeemer overlooking Rio de Janeiro. The beauty of this is you can see the steps leading up. You can go inside the monument, and there the great works of the African leaders and our history is there. The great works of Dr. Clarke and Dr. Ben and our sisters. This is the work, my first work in terms of Cheikh Anta Diop, Civilization and Barbarism. This is the French version that I used to help to translate the Diop work into into English. And of course, Dr. Clarke has made an enormous contribution with his great works, Africans at the Crossroads, African, and he's talking about the great leaders, including Kwame Nkrumah, Malcolm X, Du Bois, Lumumba, and Garvey. And so we are, if we pull this material together, seriously contributing to the rise of African peoples. And okay, we'll show what AHSA as an organization has been. It's about scholar warriors. And this is an example of a scholar warriors that includes Dr. Clarke, myself, Dr. Van, Professor Scobie, Professor Small. And again, we have worked together as a global family from Africa, from the Caribbean, to make our work felt. And our current AHSA leadership has prepared a book on Dr. John Henrik Clarke that is our contribution. AHSA has been linking up with various organizations on the continent to cement these various institutions, organizations that we need. And we have to give thanks that this particular event gives us an example on how and why we need to continue to link up AHSA, link up Cape Coast University, link up the whole Panafest ideas. And that is true Pan-Africanism that's going to have a great impact on our world. We're on a victorious path, and we have to stay clear on that path. I'm glad I had a chance to be a part of this enormous activity. Thank you very much for those of you who pulled this together, and thank you for those of us who will be carrying this heavy burden into the future. As Africans establish their concept of nation, concept of collective, communal, global relationship, and prepare the way for our youth. Thank you very much. Peace and power.
Thank you, Dr. Jeffries. Presentation by Dr. Opoku-Agyemang and also to
excuse me because I don't speak English very well. But the language is not a problem to my tonight. Today, I am here because the diaspora, Colombian diaspora, and the Black community in Colombia, now that it's necessary to meet because don't have other mechanisms to diaspora, to strong of diaspora. I want to thank to the director. This is a present from University, Cartagena University, and my community, Palenque, San Basilio of Palenque. The diaspora in the other side, the ocean, need your lecture, need your work, need your book. It's necessary because we only can read the European, the North American, and not African. We need to give to the heritage, the history, the association, because I believe if Spain, Panafest, Saint African, and insist Afro diaspora in the other side need Africa, need. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pereira. I had the privilege yesterday of sitting in on Professor Pereira's presentation, and I was telling my colleagues that it was amazing and such a wonderful sign of the diaspora and Pan-Africanism to be in a room where we have an Afro-Colombian professor speaking in Spanish being translated into English with a Ghanaian interpreter. And so I was saying it was such an interesting moment to be there in the room. And so we need you too, Professor Herrera. So he needs us and we need him. Now I think we're going to take a bit of a break and then we'll come back. Thank you very much. Yes, so we'll just take 5 minutes to stretch ourselves and then we'll come back to the roundtable on John Henrik Clarke. So we had the appetizer, we're about to eat the main meal. So don't run away. The main meal. All right, so we'll see you all in 5 minutes. Just stretch your legs around and then back. It's being done. After he made one of his many glorious presentations, what he thought of the white custodians of the Black experience. And he looked at me and said, I have less regard for those Africans and African descendants who are not writing and publishing about their own experience. And that is the challenge for us. Dr. Clarke
was an eminent scholar, professor. His goal was to educate people of African descent, or as we like to say, those kissed by the sun, on our true heritage and legacy. You heard Dr. Jeffries talk about Connect and our early beginnings. This is very important. A lot of scholars, particularly white and many Blacks, like to diminish our history coming out of Kemet or Egypt. This is because you cannot justify and rationalize slavery based on the truth. In order to sustain and promote slavery, the misinformation regarding the inferiority of Black people had to be put out as a truth. And unfortunately, here we are, 400 years after the end, transatlantic slave trade, slavery, colonialism still going on in some places. We are still holding on to that misinformation that we are a lesser people. We're holding on to this paradigm of dominant support. And our goal in terms of getting education is to incorporate what the Europeans have put out there, as Dr. Nketsia has talked about, their ideas, their theories, in order to assimilate into the wider culture. And it is a difficult divide. I walked in a minute yesterday on the session encouraging students to choose a career, how to discern what you want to do. And yes, you have to eat. Yes, you have to be part of greater society. And these are the lessons that you learn. When you go for your exams, they're not going to ask you what Dr. Henrik Clarke said. They're going to ask you what Socrates said, what Plato said. But what you have to do is know who you are, know your history. You can navigate the two. You can learn what they say in order to get through. But in order to thrive and grow spiritually, you have to grasp the true history and culture. And that's what Dr. Clarke was all about. He said, our culture is our strength. It's not something that we can walk away from. Yes, Western culture is all around us. We're getting it through the media, everywhere. But we cannot let that be our truth. That is not who we are. That is not us. We cannot embrace their truth as our truth. We need to know who we are, take a stand, defend our people. At the basis of all of Clarke's work was his love. That's what propelled him, his love for African people. This is what was taken from us through the transatlantic slave trade, slavery, and colonialism. Our families were torn asunder, and that is our theme for this colloquium. We have to go back and pull our families together, pull ourselves together, because that is our wealth, our strength. Notice our health. Notice you did not have high cases of diabetes, cancer, heart failure until people on the continent began eating Western foods. Before KFC came here, you did not have those problems. So we have to go back and look at, we just can't willy-nilly go out here and accept all that is going on. We have to be conscious, think about who we are, what we are, where we came from, and where we're going, or we will witness our demise. And that's a good place to stop. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And hope you all grow in the spirit of Dr.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. We acknowledge our international participants who are joining us via Zoom. I hope you are all listening in. You know, it's interesting that a lot of great Africans in the diaspora made Ghana their home, their home. I almost made a mistake to stay home away from home. It is their home. And Kwame Nkrumah was one of those early African leaders who invited our brothers and sisters in the diaspora to come to Ghana and make it their home. And John Henrik Clarke has a very interesting connection with Ghana. Mr. Rex Junkie here has made a little compilation of that connection, and he's going to share with us in just a couple of minutes. Rex.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. When I learned of the connection between Dr. Clarke and Kwame Nkrumah, I was less surprised and more curious. Less surprised because these are two gentlemen who have Dr. Clarke make this point. What we do for ourselves depends on what we do about ourselves. And Nkrumah is known for this famous Independence Day speech. The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. So these are two different men who are the same goals, who are the same desire. In 1935, a young man left the shores of Ghana to study in the USA, only to return and help his countrymen. This person was the person of Francis Nketsia V, who later became Kwame Nkrumah. As a student, Nkrumah was mentored by Dr. Henrik Clarke. During his 10-year stay in the United States, they happened to meet quite often, and they joined the same study sect, the Harlem History Club. Now, in the late 1940s, Nkrumah had to return back to help in the fight for independence when he was fought by the UGC. He later became the first president in 1967, and in 1968, we had Dr. Henrik Clarke visit Ghana. It wasn't surprising. Their ties and roots had taken root. From 1958 to 1959, Clarke started working in Ghana, where he served as a journalist for the Ghana Evening News. Some records have it that he lectured at the University of Ghana, and most of his publications, in fact, had Ghana in mind. It's no wonder that Sankofa World Publishers quotes, Ghana is believed to have been his favorite intellectual respite. Some of his publications about Ghana include Kwame Nkrumah, His Years in America, which was published in 1974. We have Old Ghana, which was published in 1960. We have New Ghana, which was also published in 1960. And we have Third Class on the Blue Train to Kumasi, 1962. It is in this same unity that ASA continues to have a long-lasting tie with Ghana and now Cape Coast. I believe that by naming the Center for African International Studies for Dr. Henrik Clarke, this long-lasting union continues to live forever. Thank you very much.
Great rundown, big spread. So our final presenter is Dr. Isaac Miller, who is a lecturer in the Department of English. So he will build on the brief history that has been given us about Henrik Clarke and his connection to Ghana. Dr. Miller.
Thank you very much. I'm privileged to be here. Dr. Williams, President of EHSA. All protocol observed. I'm honored to be talking about Dr. Henrik Clarke. Although what I'm going to say about him are things I have read and listened to him on YouTube and other places. I got closely, let's say I felt him very closely in my reading and trying to process his ideology, his Pan-Africanism, and I'm happy to share what I have with you. In my submission, I'll just briefly consider his advocacy and by extension his discourses on Pan-Africanism as discourses of resistance against imperialism. Imperialism, looking at colonialism, slavery, neo-colonialism. And I'm looking at these in the light of the notion of cultural trauma. And I'll also briefly make connection with Nkrumah's own ideology of Pan-Africanism. I'll define cultural trauma as given by Neil Smelser. A memory accepted and publicly given credence by a relevant membership group, evoking an event or situation which is A, laden with negative affect, represented as indelible and regarded as threatening a society's existence or violating one or more of its fundamental cultural presuppositions or group identity. And for us here, and for Dr. Clarke, the events evoked are transatlantic slave trade and colonialism. We can characterize his discourses as radicalist. And I'm going to define what I mean by radicalist on his own quotation. A response he gave when he was interviewed by Japanese on his impression when people call him radical. What is his interpretation or understanding of that? And his response was, I think they mean a person that dares to disagree with the norm. When the norm does not serve the best interest of the people. I believe a radical is one who dares to search for the truth, expose it, leave it, and even if it's against him or herself. Dr. Clarke saw history as a tool of writing back racist Western ideologies and distorted histories that supported slavery and colonialism. History becomes a means of reclaiming a lost identity for the African towards a positive post-colonial future. In other words, it is a reconfiguration and a reconstitution of a cultural trauma, reclaim a positive identity, and project a desirable future for the African and African American. We may want to first illustrate the traumatic experiences that the vast majority of the African people Dr. Clarke wrote about went through, and that which formed the background for his discourses. He has this to say in one of the interviews, the numerous interviews he has done. This African cultural response to slavery and oppression in the Americas and the Caribbean began on the shores of West Africa, when captured Africans tried to take African soil in their hands and sometimes in their mouth onto the slave ships as the last desperate struggle to hold on to the peace of Africa. If we look at African indigenous practice, land is in era. It connects the living with their ancestors as part of the very heritage featured them by these revered forebears. Our ancestors found their land by various means, including first settlement, acts of war, and sometimes shedding their own blood. And for the African, any alienation from the land or environment disconnects the people from their ancestors, for that matter, their very essence. And this is exactly what the transatlantic history did. The African. And is supported by humiliating discourses that justify colonialism, such as the colonizers' representation of colonialism as a civilizing mission. The African was ideologically constructed as a less human in order to justify slavery. That provides counter discourses, the process of discursive decolonization aimed at dismantling the racist discourses. He notes, race is a myth because nature created no races. Racism is a derogatory manifestation of this myth, and the concept that people, by virtue of race, are better than other people. Now the question is, to use Achebe's words, the novel language of the savannah, how do we pacify an embedded that the African American have gone through colonization and the transatlantic slave? For Clarke, the answer is to fill the missing pages in the biased history of the world provided by dominant historians of the West. Have and propagate a Black perspective in history, not looking at history as some subjective enterprise, but still an objective science that filling in the distortions and stating the crooked, biased narratives that have been advanced to support the slave trade and colonization. And for him, this is not a war of race. It's not blacks against whites, but this is goodwill, people of goodwill against ideologically biased, evil people suppressing the African freedom. Indeed, for Clarke, Pan-Africanism or resistance against Western imperialism is not a fight, indeed, as I said, against a white man or woman, but a war against unfairness, forceful with fatal consequences against imperialism. And this is one area is like a coma. He emphasized this in many of his quotations, the fact that our objective, or the desired objective in Pan-Africanism and in championing African freedom, is to claim dignity for African while not threatening, or let's say shifting the poles, creating a kind of an Afrocentric society. He notes in another quotation I'm giving on his comment on the championship or the advocacy for Black studies. Says, I could see then where we were making a mistake even in demanding Black studies, a mistake we are still making. Black studies is not a separate entity. We are talking about missing pages in the history of the world. We are talking about not only the cheating of Black students of information they need in the world, we are talking about the cheating of the white students also, because in the world of tomorrow, white students and Black students will have to look at each other from a different point of view than previously with a different set of information. So the emphasis here being on a war against imperialism, not just Blacks alone, but Blacks and whites together. In winning this race, we need people of all colors. Otherwise, it will be a war of futility and a war without end. Permit me to give another quotation from him on a question posed on him on his view on Afrocentrism. He said the whole concept of Afrocentrism is overestimated. It should have been called African consciousness, because without African consciousness, we will have no understanding of our history and its work, which is the most important and aligning thing. That Pan-Africanism is to claim a place in the history of Africa, reassert our identity, and let the world know our contributions to world civilization, the great civilizations of ancient times that influenced Europe and that led to many of the advancements that we have seen throughout the centuries in the Western world. Now, both gentlemen have humble beginnings. Dr. Clarke born of poor peasants in Alabama, Nkrumah born in Nkrofu, in the Western region here in Ghana, to a family that was unassuming. Both of them changed their names. For Clarke, the impetus was the desire of a young boy to be different among his peers, different from other Henrik Clarke. And I think this was an unconscious rebellion, trying to reassert himself in a society that was against his very own. In many of his interviews, he has noted that right from his childhood, he had tried to nurture this view of resistance. He says, almost from the beginning as a child, I started to raise essential questions inside myself about the things that I observed and about the things people declared true and literally dared to question. These who would impose the truth on me had no control over me when I was alone. I would question the truth and keep my conscious conclusions to myself. I did not argue with them about what I thought or felt because I never told them. I lived inside myself seemingly forever and hoped for the day when I could speak my mind. In portrait of a liberation scholar. For Nkrumah, the change of name was to claim his Africanness and African identity, reclaim his spatial, temporal identity in the world as a Saturday born and a ninth child of his parents, being the Akan philosopher. Dr. Nkrumah met, as we heard, Dr. Clarke in the US, came to Ghana. They had several interactions together. But most importantly, they share a common ideology on African unity. For Clarke, Africans and African Americans have not come together because both of them are still listening to the voices of their former slave masters and their former colonial masters. You cannot help yourself until you know yourself. You cannot change the world until you change yourself. We know that Nkrumah championed the union government in Africa, and correspondingly, Clarke helped structure the program for the Organization of African American Unity. And said, we designed that program on my living room table. The formation of the Organization of African Unity American unity and the establishment of an official connection with Africa was one of the most important acts of the 20th century, which resonates very well with Nkrumah's own ideology of unite or perish. Finally, there's a conscious effort in the discourses of both gentlemen to represent Pan-Africanism as a fight against ideologies and creating a new personality for the African, and not a racial war, as I said. Not a war against whites or people of other color. It's Africa's claim of a part of the world, a claim for dignity, just like any other. I conclude with a quotation from Nkrumah, which is representative of the Pan-African ideology of both of them. Who is the enemy? Enemy is imperialism, which uses as system of colonialism and neo-colonialism. Let us be very clear about this. Let us not lose sight of the real object, which is the liquidation of colonialism and imperialism in all its forms. Thank you.
Great. I will not even attempt to comment on these lessons because I think they are straightforward and we must all learn from Dr. John Henrik Clarke, Kwame Nkrumah, etc. Yeah, we either unite or we perish. It's as simple as that. Yeah, we are being kept divided because the more we are divided, the more it is easier for our natural resources to be taken away, for the enrichment of countries far away, and then we go back to them and beg for money. It's ridiculous. So we need to unite and own what is ours, you know. Yeah. So for now, we are going straight into the next session, and we'll spend a few minutes and talk about the Panafest Colloquium. We want to develop this colloquium going forward to something bigger, something more dynamic. So we're going to share ideas on how we can do that. But before we start off with the chairman of the Panafest Planning Committee, I want to announce to you that I have Nana Kwadwo Nketsia's book here. It's a fantastic book. Don't be afraid of the size. It's a very interesting read. Nana tells me, hey, you are holding this book. It's a very difficult book. Then I said, it is difficult things that develop the world, not easy ones. So we will read it. And so at this point, I will call on Miss Angela Frapia to come and take us through the brief program on the Panafest Colloquium. Angela, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and the price for the book is just a very simple 120 Ghana cedis. So that's like $25.
Hello. Yes, my name is Angela Frapia, and I'm the moderator for the roundtable on the Panafest Colloquium development. So please take your lead. Okay, so as Dr. Vital mentioned, we are going to have a little welcoming speech by the chairman of the Colloquium Planning Committee. So please let's give a hand to welcome Professor Kwadwo Opoku-Agyemang.
Good afternoon. As to say, all too soon, the program is winding down. the roundtable really it has the topic the way forward after 16 different versions of the colloquium since 1992. What lessons have we learned? What is the way forward? I am quoting Rabbi Kohen when I say this. The core mission of Panafest Colloquium is that the colloquium is where we, all our scholars, intellectuals, students, and activists, to discuss, analyze, and reach consensus on resolutions on issues concerning critical issues and challenges we face as African people at home and in the diaspora. You will notice that this time round, during this colloquium, quite a lot of emphasis has been placed on the life and work of Dr. Henrik Clarke, and it's for a reason. The association he founded has been a very strong and reliable partner for Panafest itself, and especially for Panafest Colloquium. We would like to express our appreciation to the president and the association for the support they have given us throughout these years. But what are the lessons? What is the way forward? I have a number of items here that I would like to share with you. I think when we stand back and look at what we are doing, there are certain areas, certain groups of people, certain structures that we have to nurture in order to grow. And the first of these is we need, in the way we do things, in the way we proceed, we need to insist on closer collaboration with the returnees. We need closer collaborations with those who are already here. It's very important. In fact, it's crucial to our mission. They need to share their stories, as Sister Imakos did yesterday. They need to share their stories and life lessons. We invited AAAG. We are not even sure we received the mail. But they had a place of honor at the table. I mean, AAAG, African American Association of Ghana. We need to find ways to bring them in more closely. They are a natural part in this. The stories of personalities like Rabbi Kohen, Sister Imakos should be known nationally. And pioneer returnees like Doctors Sarah and Robert Lee should be told so our children know. And from their stories, we can relate to them the meaning of return. the full weight and density of a return. We can send our students to interview and report on their lives and experiences so that we can begin to build archives. Ghana should listen carefully because the stories they tell will influence the decisions of those considering a relocation here. Very important. I remember years ago, I sent students who the project were interviewing Dr. Lee, Dr. Sarah, Dr. Robert. I still have copies of the work. That if we are able to do what we plan with the Center for African and International Studies, we ought to be able to publish material very easily. As part of this, I think UCC, through the Center for African and International Studies, ought to have a formal agreement, a formal understanding, MOU, with the Du Bois Center as central to the work. In much the same way, UCC and the Center for African and International Studies could have arrangement of some kind with the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Same with Schomburg Library. The Colombian embassy has shown such strong interest in the things we do in countries like Colombia, Cuba, Brazil. We should make space for them here. I'm talking about an idea that was mooted by our Vice Chancellor, that we locate the Panafest Colloquium in the Center for African and International Studies. And there's a movement now to make a place for Henrik Clarke, which accounts in part for all the different excellent papers that we have heard about this. We are able to do this. We are going to contact the various historically Black universities, Black colleges and universities for letters of support. And by this, we'll be able to create linkages with them. One can therefore foresee a period of fluent traffic between Black universities out there, African universities, not just in Ghana, and elsewhere in Africa. So that the idea of Panafest as a Pan-African festival will begin to grow larger and larger. As a way of moving things forward, therefore, we plan to request from the university the creation of an endowed chair for a distinguished scholar in African studies, the center to be named for. We will therefore be able to have all kinds of literary and scientific activities with our people out there. this will be a way of rolling the agenda. I promise to be short. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Opoku-Agyemang. At this point, I'm going to invite Prof. Ife to give us a few suggestions on the future for Panafest Colloquium.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And good afternoon, everyone. I'll be very, very brief. I think what we are discussing is not just a festival, it's not just a movement, it's not just another activity. What we are discussing, as has been said by Nana Nketsia and many others, is the African consciousness. And I think that should carry through everything we do. So I just want to, my presentation was a question, and what I'm going to say is also a question. What has our preparation for this particular one been like? What has been our attitude? Those from the diaspora, as well as those of us here, what has been our attitude? Has it been the best? Has our attendance been the best? So I think, as has been said, we should all look in ourselves and be real in what we want to do. We want to be Africans and show others that Africans matter and that we are proud of ourselves. But to say that, what I would like to say is that I don't think that all in all, what we have done so far, we have been able to tell ourselves, or those who are watching us, that we are proud of ourselves and we see each other as equal. So I really think that we have a lot of work to do on ourselves first. So my suggestion is, as we go forward, let's all look in ourselves and make sure that we respect ourselves and that we act the way we must act. If we say 9 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Those are very powerful suggestions from Ife and Prof, thank you very much. So I'm going to invite Prof. Victor Yanka to also give us a few suggestions on the future of Panafest Colloquium. Prof. Yanka, if you're around, you have to take the stage now.
Yeah, I will be very brief. It's supposed to be a brief history of the Panafest Colloquium, right? And the history of the Panafest Colloquium is inexorably tied to the history of Panafest itself. The colloquium was birthed by as an aspect of Panafest. So it was conceived as an intellectual forum with the aim, among others, of projecting the intellectual capacity of Africa and its diaspora in responding to the many challenges that faced by African people. So this festival was inspired by a paper presented by Esi Sutherland-Addy in 1980. And so, working on that paper, a number of people came together and then decided to institute what we call Panafest today. So the first Panafest was organized in 1992, which was a very local thing. It wasn't very big. And the colloquium alongside with it, which was not also big. But the colloquium in 1994, which was bigger,
and more international, run under the theme of we have a running theme, the re-emergence of African civilization, and the sub-theme was reuniting the African family for development. And here we had some people, a number of people attending, including the poet the poet, lawyer, and writer Norbese Phillips. Now, there was a 3-year hiatus, and then the next Panafest in 1997 came with a bang. It was, in fact, I can say today that it was the biggest and best organized Panafest because it had several people. And one of the reasons for the success of that Panafest was that there were so many people who came in to sponsor it. And I have this book here, this is a brochure for the 1997 Panafest, and I counted not less than 40 sponsors for the program. And that will tell us where we should be going with our Panafest in the colloquium as well, because the colloquium was attended by several eminent people from the diaspora and Ghana, including, you just saw Dr. Leonard Jeffries, he was there, filmmakers, Haile Gerima was there, and so many others. So we need to take another look at Panafest. So after the successful 97 colloquium, the festival started to take a dip. And there were talks about funding and so on. Now, 1997, 99, we had another Panafest, talked about a foundation rather than government taking, control or being the organizers of Panafest also came in. So a Panafest foundation came in between. Now, let me fast forward to 2007 and mention that one because it was also a very significant Panafest because it coincided with the independence of Ghana. And so government got involved a little bit. But also importantly, I want to go by the 1999, was it? Yeah, 99 festival, 2001 festival, particularly, was the one in which we merged Emancipation Day with Panafest. So Panafest and Emancipation Day came in. Now, this is supposed to be a big history, so I will not dwell on every single Panafest. So let me just the colloquium. Now, suffice it to say that over the years, the sub-teams spoke to topical issues of the time. Participation has reduced over the few editions we have had. However, I must say that we probably had better participation in 2019 edition over the years, and the culprit for this current one, the 2021 one, is the pandemic, which as I said, has made it difficult for a lot of people to be here with us. But as I said, I would have had a bigger colloquium. Now, this year's colloquium was planned with so many ambitious programs in mind. However, we have not been able to carry them through, and I've already mentioned the purpose for that. For instance, and Professor Opoku-Agyemang did not mention the homestay program, where we wanted Africans to come, African Americans, Africans from the diaspora and everywhere to come and settle with people here on the continent, in their homes, and then stay with them, and then with them, learn their way of life and so on. That would be a way of securing the family, because we are talking about securing the African family. But unfortunately, this has not happened. Right. So there were other very important programs. And this year's Panafest will have also been very significant, as we have seen, because of the participation of the AHSA, African Heritage Studies Association. So we are becoming a bigger family, and we are hoping that we will continue to be this big family. And I want to say that we hope this involvement will not just be a marriage of convenience between UCC and AHSA, but will turn into a genuine beneficial, mutually beneficial alliance for all of us, all in the interest of the African family. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Nketsia, for the brief history you've shared with us. We have in our midst the chair for the Panafest Foundation, Prof. Esi Sutherland-Addy, and Prof. Esi is going to share a few words with us.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad that I've been able to catch up with you, even if it's for a few minutes. I'd like to begin by thanking the organizing committee and the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast for taking this particular colloquium up so seriously and also looking beyond the colloquium to see what else can be done to promote the Pan-Africanist cause, which has to be part of our educational system if we are going to get our minds into the right shape to secure ourselves and to take care of our wealth, our health, and our souls. So I believe very sincerely that the colloquium this year is probably the heartbeat of Panafest 2021, and please give yourselves a round of applause for what you're doing and what you've done. Also, of course, to thank ASA for coming and being part of the organization. Thank you, Dr. Ife, Dr. Afia, and so on, all of you for what you have done. We have to work together. We have to expand the base of those who are involved in this particular type of event. If it's going to be ours, it means it requires our time, our energy, our creativity, and whatever resources we have. I'd like to encourage all of us that one of the most important things is that when Panafest comes on, people should attend it, should attend the event, should be part of it. This morning I was phoned on the radio and I was asked whether, you know, the people of Cape Coast are allowed, and I said, oh my goodness, you know, it's because of you that the thing is being done. So please make sure that you are here. So we want to, when we look at the future, it's a work in progress. We want to work towards making sure that we raise the kind of funding that is required. And it doesn't have to be huge funding. If everybody would make a contribution to the endowment fund, doesn't matter whether it's $5 or 25 CDs or whatever it is, but giving something, making sure that where there are events, it's 20 CDs to go to an event at the CNC. In fact, for tomorrow, today and tomorrow, it's 10 CDs. Go and encourage the performers to be part of it. We would like also for people to make this thing work by registering. You know, if you're a performer, if you're an intellectual, register for 2023 and make sure that your voice can be heard, that you can interact with other performers and intellectuals, and let's see, you know, what can be done. We would, in this country, I do believe that we have to become much more aware of the ownership history that we are talking about, and for those of you who were at the replay, I did say that, you know, and young people are interested in football. I did say that the fact that when England played Italy, the African descendant students, players, were the ones who were the most abused, and it was racial abuse. That tells us that racism is here with us
it is present, it is part of the institutions that are in charge of the world's power. If we talk about COVID at the moment, the power play around vaccines is also about us being in a weaker position. And so we have to realize that imperialism, colonialism, racism, they have yesterday, but today. So we as people who are thinking have to think about these things and have to think about how we can empower ourselves so that we can be in charge of our own narrative. That is why Emancipation Day is talking about weaving our own narrative. What is your story? What is your role? No, a lot of us have gone abroad. We are nurses, we are caregivers, we are doctors. We've been on the front line. Has anybody told that story of Africans on the front line taking care of people who have had COVID or who have COVID? How about the scientists who are helping to find a vaccine, who are of color? All of these things have to come out. So I want to say that the question of having a reasoning time at Panafest is because we must sit down and think through some of these issues. So I would like to thank all of you for being here and staying the course. And I'm just in 2023, we will have a grand gathering, and that we would have made some progress. So between now and 2023, let's keep connected. Let's make sure that we are working together. We can have virtual fora. We can do so many things to make sure that we build up towards 2023. But thank you all very much, and I'm so glad that you've had a fruitful time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Esi Sutherland-Addy.